Now on BBC News, the latest business news from across the globe. Business Today.
Oil prices on the up again as the US and Iran reject each other's plans for ending the war. UK government borrowing costs get more expensive as pressure mounts on the Prime Minister to quit. And censorship row. A member of the US communications regulator hits out at the Trump administration for its treatment of Disney. Welcome to Business Today. I'm Ramzan Karmali. Well, as the Iran war and the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz shows no sign of easing, there are growing concerns that it will mean higher oil prices for longer. Prices have been rising after President Trump dismissed Iran's response to US proposals to end the war as, quote, totally unacceptable. Iran's foreign ministry says its own proposal was responsible and generous. However, the CEO of the Saudi state-owned oil giant Aramco has said that oil markets won't normalise until at least next year, even if the strait reopened imminently. Meanwhile, the leading Wall Street bank, JP Morgan, says it expects the price of Brent crude to stay in the low $100 for the rest of the year, which will stoke concerns about inflation. Well, a short time ago, a barrel of benchmark Brent crude was trading at just under $104. Well, let's go to Dubai and bring in Amina Bakr, head of Middle East and OPEC Plus energy research at the data provider Kepler. Amina, thank you so much for joining us. So let's start with that warning from JP Morgan that we could see oil in the low hundreds for some time to come. I mean, just how damaging will that be?
I think it's very plausible that we do get that result, given the fact that, I mean, we're not going to see an instant recovery, even if we do have a resolution on Hormuz. In terms of how that impacts the world economy, that definitely is going to generate a slowdown worldwide, and what we might see even a damage to demand here. Bear in mind that already, I mean, we have a loss of around 850 barrels to date that have been lost from the Middle East. So we need to kind of compensate for those supplies and then look at a path towards recovery, which is a long path.
Well, that brings me on to the comments made by the CEO of Saudi Aramco about the fact that you say 850 million barrels. He's talking about a billion barrels have been lost. Even if there was a resolution, we're not going to see the taps just start flowing, are we?
No, for sure. I mean, it depends on the country. With Saudi Aramco and Saudi Arabia, I mean, the CEO today, again, he said that in a matter of 3 weeks' time, they could bring production to 12 million barrels a day. But that's Saudi Arabia, and it's an exceptional case. With other countries where you have infrastructure that has been badly damaged during the war, and I'm talking about Iraq, Kuwait, Bahrain, and so on, we're talking about months here, 3 to 4 months. I mean, that's optimistically going to take us into next year, but we might even see a longer period needed for a recovery.
And just quickly, are you surprised at the price of Brent at the moment? Yes, it is high at above $100, but considering last month we were 126 and we're in the middle of probably is one of the worst crises we've ever seen, why are we not seeing oil prices even more elevated?
I think they've been reacting to sentiment and reacting to headlines around the U.S. and specifically President Trump saying that he's going to be finding a resolution. To be honest with you, I'm quite surprised that prices are even higher than we are seeing them today, given the huge supply loss and the time needed to recover all of this. And I mean, even with Hormuz itself, the logistics around it, having the bottlenecks, I mean, having the vessels leave the strait and then come back again and load, that's going to take months. So I am surprised that we're not looking at, $140 at this time. And I think it's been, prices have been really reacting to kind of the sentiment that we have a near-term resolution, which I don't think is the case at all.
And in terms of OPEC Plus and their reaction to all of this, we've seen some movement, of course, with membership. How do you think they'll react in the long term?
I think they want to continue having predictable policy for the market during these times of great uncertainty. That's why they're having monthly meetings. That's why they're continuing to unwind the cuts, even if we don't see that extra supply coming into the market because of the Strait of Hormuz. But I think they want to assess the situation once things finally normalize. Maybe, I mean, they would even consider a policy of increasing production further, but we're not there yet. But I know that they will continue being a force to make sure that we have stability in this market.
Amina Bakr from Kepler, many thanks for your thoughts.
Thank you.
OK, well, let's turn now to events in the US, where it seems the Trump administration is engaged in a targeted effort to censor Disney and its ABC network. That's according to the sole Democrat on the Federal Communications Commission, which is the regulator for the industry. Anna Gomez wrote these comments in a letter she sent to Disney CEO Josh D'Amaro. Well, let's go over to New York and speak to our very own Samira Hussain. Samira, what's this letter all about and how significant is it?
It is very significant to hear from a person who sits on the Federal Communications Commission to be that outspoken and to be providing this letter to ABC, which is owned by Disney, to the Disney CEO. What this is really all coming back to is really the Trump administration really trying to push back against any networks, television networks, that air things that they do not like. And so the most recent fight has been with regards to the late night talk show host Jimmy Kimmel, who a few weeks earlier had made some jokes about Melania Trump, that Mr. Trump took quickly to his Truth Social network to urge that ABC fire Mr. Kimmel. And he went further, and then the next day we see that, they are then encouraged, ABC has to renew their licenses a full year or two earlier than they normally would. So this is just one evidence of that. Then there's something that's more recent with another talk show that also airs on ABC, where the FCC is now challenging whether that particular program can be considered a news program and therefore sort of outside the realm of some of these political scopes that, that dictate how much time can be given to one person of one political party versus another political party.
And Samira, what bearing do you think all of this will have on the future of Disney then?
Look, this is just putting a lot of pressure on the news divisions of Disney. So for ABC, years ago, we saw that the Trump administration had put a lawsuit onto George Stephanopoulos, who is the morning show host for ABC's Good Morning America, for a program that he did, and ABC ended up settling. And that really was a moment where I think a lot of television networks, started really paying attention to this kind of pressure. We're seeing that the Trump administration is applying this kind of pressure onto other media organizations. And just in terms of what happens next, I think it really sort of depends on how these companies are able to sort of push back against what they feel is unfair.
Samira Hussain, our New York business correspondent. Many thanks for your time. OK, let's turn now to the UK, where the cost of government borrowing has been increasing amid ongoing speculation about the future of the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. One member of Parliament from Starmer's own Labour Party says he should resign by September after last week's disastrous local election results. The results prompted him to make a speech today, laying out why he's still the right person to lead the country and warning this is not the time for more instability.
If we don't get this right, our country will go down a very dark path. So just as I take responsibility for the results, I also take responsibility for delivering the change that we promised. And I take responsibility for not walking away, not plunging our country into chaos as the Tories did time and again, chaos that did lasting damage to this country.
OK, well, to get more on this, I'm joined now by our economics editor, Faisal Islam. Faisal, let's look at the cost of UK borrowing, government borrowing and the gilt market. that did edge up this morning. The pound also softened as well. What does this tell us about the sort of the precarious situation we find ourselves politically here in the UK?
Yeah, the effective cost of borrowing for government over long term, 10 to 30 years, it did go up the equivalent of just under 0.1 percentage points. That is notable in terms of government debt, gilt yields as they're known. It was significantly higher than the rise we saw elsewhere amongst the major economies, which was, under half, third to half of that move in the UK. That was obviously, so there's obviously a couple of things going on here. There's obviously the rise in oil prices and what's going on in Gulf, but clearly there's an extra factor here, and some of this has been built in over a period of days in terms of the return of some political uncertainty to the United Kingdom. In many ways, you step back from it, and it's an extraordinary thing to behold, that a government that has been in office for less than 2 years, with a massive majority that normally gives you the power to do whatever you want in the UK system, that it finds itself in this pickle. But certainly the Prime Minister was giving a speech fighting for his political survival after some doubts expressed by a few dozen Labour MPs publicly, and the question is how many privately share that view, how many members of the Cabinet, how many ministers share that view, and what we got today was a pathway through this whereby backbench MPs are suggesting the Prime Minister leaves by September, and that is perceived to give an opportunity for other candidates to get their act together, principally the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, who needs a little bit more time to get into Parliament if he wanted to challenge the Prime Minister or to participate in any leadership contest. So it's still ifs, buts, maybes, but these are probabilities that the financial markets deal with. And as you say, just today we've seen a slightly higher edging up of gilt yields, of government bond yields for the UK than we've seen in other major economies. It could be a sign of things to come if this uncertainty, which looks likely, continues.
And Faisal, in his speech today as well, British Steel also came under the spotlight and plans to renationalise. This has got quite a big global impact, hasn't it?
Yes, clearly British Steel has been in some bother. It's under Chinese ownership right now. That was the subject of some interest, actually, from the US when it did its trade deal last summer. They were asking questions about exactly, does the UK have its own sovereign steel industry? The government had already moved to control large swathes of this particular business, which is owned by Jingi Steel. This would complete that process in terms of nationalisation. The notable thing here is that this is what Keir Starmer chose to communicate to his own MPs as an example of decisive action, which was bringing steel back into public ownership and rescuing it for a more resilient economy. There may be more such policy initiatives to help shore up the Prime Minister's position right now.
OK, that's Faisal Islam, our economics editor, here with us on Business Today. And I'm afraid that's all we've got time for Business Today, but stay with us here on BBC News.